Hello, apologies for the delay in this video, but I was away celebrating my birthday at the weekend, and believe it or not, when I planned that trip weeks ago, I had no idea the amount of hullabaloo that was going to kick off in the meantime. Now, before I get into addressing Timmy's video, there's a couple of things that I want to point out, and the first one is that this was never about drama. This was always about accountability. Timmy released an extremely deceptive video, and he deserved to be held accountable for it. And so I'm not interested in dragging this out for drama. I'm not interested in fact-checking everything Timmy says from now on and hounding him down for lying. I want everyone to know that this specific video he made was bullshit. But unfortunately, in Timmy's new video, he's shown that he's not willing to be accountable. He had the perfect opportunity to explain how a deceptive video like that could come around naturally with the best of intentions, but unfortunately, he chose to not do that and to largely just double down on it. And that's why I've decided that this is the last video that I'm making on the Timmy situation. This is my final response. I have nothing left to say. I pointed out that his video was deceptive. I laid out my case. He's made his response. This is my response. I guess we're both going to pin them up on the public board of discussion and walk away. Now, the second thing I want to address is the debate, which was absolutely a hot mess. Now, obviously, I can't speak on Timmy's behalf, but I'm willing to bet that neither of us are particularly proud of that debate. Now, the reason I uploaded it was, again, accountability, because we both acted like kids shouting over each other, and you deserve to know it. I always told everyone, regardless of what happens in that discussion, I will post it online because you deserve to know what went on. I'm not just gonna hide the footage and pretend it didn't happen. I think that both of us went into it with the wrong mindset. Now, I'll tell you mine. Mine was that I was gonna hold him accountable for what he said, and I wasn't gonna let him weasel away or try and spin a narrative. I was gonna make him explain for what he said exactly in the video, so I wrote down all the quotes that he said, and I was gonna go through them and hold him to account for each one. But unfortunately, that meant that every time he did try go off track, it meant I had to yell over him, and it wasn't a good look. And then Timmy's mindset going into it seemed to be to try and discredit me when it comes to Columbine, which is, if you think about it, a really odd thing to try, given that this whole thing isn't about how much I know about Columbine, it's about Timmy lying in a video. Was he telling the truth, or was he lying? That was the point. It doesn't matter if I know what happened at McDonald's or not. Ultimately, the whole thing just boiled down to a big dick contest, only neither of us have one. And so we just ended up looking like a couple of silly billies. Anyway, with that being said, let's get into the response video. Now, the first thing that Timmy addresses in his response video is again Sue talking about the unknowable in her TED Talk. Now, if you remember, in his original video, Timmy showed the end of Sue's TED Talk and then claimed that she was implying this.
But for love's sake, we must never stop trying to know the unknowable. Thank you.
She insinuates that any child could be secretly plotting a massacre and the parents can't know. However, we should keep trying anyway?
Now, I thought I'd already addressed this, but apparently not, because Timmy's still making the same error. So I'm going to try one last time to lay out exactly what it is that Sue's saying here, and I'm going to leave no room for misunderstanding. When Sue talks about the unknowable at the end of her TED Talk, she doesn't just pluck that concept from nowhere. If she had given a TED Talk and not mentioned anything as being unknowable, and then wrapped up the talk by saying we must never stop trying to know the unknowable, everyone would be very confused. The reason that she mentions the unknowable at the end of her TED Talk is because she's already established what the unknowable thing is earlier in the TED Talk. And what's the unknowable thing?
I've learned that no matter how much we want to believe we cannot know or control everything our loved ones think and feel.
She says that we can't know everything that our loved ones think and feel. And the reason that we know that this is what she's talking about is because this is the only thing she mentions as being unknowable in the whole TED Talk. Think about it like this. Imagine if I'd made this video and then at the end of this video, I said to you, and remember, never turn your back on the bees. Now, you'd be very confused, wouldn't you? You'd be super confused. But if in the middle of this video, I addressed the time when I was a kid and I got chased by bees, all of a sudden it'd make sense. And so we know that what Sue is talking about here is that you can't know everything that your loved ones are thinking and feeling, the things that are going on inside their body, not their actions, not that you can't go snoop around their rooms and that you can't try and figure out and decipher from their actions what they're doing, but that you can't know what they're thinking and feeling. That's what she's saying. And there's a big difference between saying that you can't know everything your loved ones think and feel and saying any of your kids could be a school shooter and you wouldn't know, which is what Timmy wants you to think she's saying. So then Timmy moves on to the issue of accountability. Now, if you remember, in Timmy's video, he suggests that unless Sue offers an admission of error, she has nothing to teach us. But then he deceptively cuts off the part in her TED Talk where she says she failed as a mother. Well, the good news is that now the goalposts have changed, because now, according to Timmy, she does offer admissions of error, but her admissions of error are basically hollow, because at the same time that she's offering her failures as a parent, she's also saying that it was all unknowable, even though that's not what she's saying. Now, to illustrate this point, Timmy provides us with 2 quotes.
Here's a quote from an Oprah article that Morby uses to both prove that Sue has taken accountability and that I am this big liar. I longed to talk to Dylan one last time and ask him what he'd been thinking. I spoke to him in my thoughts and prayed for understanding. I concluded that he must not have loved me because love would have prevented him from doing what he did. And though at moments I was angry with him, mostly I thought that I was the one who needed his forgiveness because I'd failed to see that he needed help. So here Sue seemingly takes accountability because she states that she needs Dylan's forgiveness because she failed to see that he needed help. And Sue later starts to waffle. She points out how no one saw that Dylan was depressed and that there were no signs. And even if there were signs, there might not be anything anyone could have done. This seemingly is the opposite of taking accountability.
Now, the issue is that this argument only makes sense if we only have one source of information, and that source of information is that specific article. But it's not. We have a lot of information. Because while in the Oprah article, she does say that she failed to see that he needed help, she also says that no one spotted that Dylan was depressed because he wasn't giving off the overt signs of depression. You'll notice that what she doesn't say is that nobody could have known that he was depressed. She simply says that no one did know. And the reason why she says this is because, as she's made clear in many other interviews, Dylan did give off signs of depression, but they were the signs of teenage depression, and she wasn't equipped to spot those signs. When Sue says that she failed to see that he needed help, she says that she failed to spot the subtle signs of teenage depression, not that she wasn't able to read his mind. Sue offers admissions of error all of the time. She says that she wishes she sat down and talked to him and asked the right questions and listened to his emotions and tried to dig deeper. She wishes she'd got him a counselor. She wishes that she had checked his room more often. The admissions of error go on and on and on. And so there is no contradiction between saying that nobody knew that Dylan was depressed because he wasn't giving off the obvious signs of depression, such as giving his possessions away and saying that the world would be better off without him, and speaking of death. You know, the sort of signs that everyone would be able to spot. And then to also say that there were subtle signs of teenage depression that she failed to see. Things such as his sleep schedule changing, late nights, sleepless nights, his attitude getting worse, the changes in his behavior. Those are the signs that she openly admits to missing. And so Sue's admission of error is that she failed to spot those signs, and thus she failed to see that he needed help. But what I do think's interesting is that this quote seemingly backs up the fact that in her TED Talk she's talking about depression when she says that you can't know everything your loved ones think and feel. And then I guess my main point in all of this would be, what does any of this have to do with Timmy cutting off Sue's TED Talk and then claiming that unless she offers an admission of error, she has nothing to tell us? Psst, and he actually does the same thing to me later in this video. But anyway, let's move on. Next up, Timmy addresses the Andrew Solomon quote, which he masqueraded as a quote by Sue Klebold. Now, he says this was a simple error and that I'm imbuing it with malice by claiming that he was lying.
Well, yes, I misattributed this quote, but this was a mistake. It's not the same thing as intentionally lying or deceiving.
But you see, to me, it doesn't seem to be a simple error, because it's not just that he showed the quote, is it? He went and searched for the quote, loaded the page into his video editing software, found which text needed to be highlighted, and then added the fancy highlighting transition. And in all of that time, he didn't realize that there was a quote from Sue directly below it. Now, I know he's only skimmed her book, but he knows damn well that Sue doesn't have a habit of quoting herself in third person. That's the sort of thing that someone watching the video wouldn't notice, but someone who's editing the video would definitely notice. But Timmy says that, yeah, sure, that was a mistake. That was just an innocent mistake, but it doesn't really matter because Sue almost verbatim agrees with what Andrew Solomon has to say, even though he never provides a quote of Sue actually saying those words. But as easy as that one was to refute, that's not even the more damning one. The more damning one is when Timmy presents the words of the counselor Andrea Sanchez as Sue Klebold's words. Now, those are obviously not Sue's words. If you've read the diversion notes, like I have and Timmy has, you'll know that the words that are typed up are the words of the counselor Andrea Sanchez. If it's Sue's words, they're either handwritten and you can barely read them, or they're provided as direct quotes. It's blatantly obvious that those are not Sue's words, but then on top of that, we have Timmy saying that Sue openly admits to kicking Byron out of the house, which is objectively false. But when he addresses this in his video, Timmy starts doing something very interesting, which is he starts arguing about whether not Sue kicked Byron out of the house, which is not the point. The point is that Sue does not openly admit to kicking Byron out of the house.
I found out after the video went live that almost 20 years later, Sue denies kicking Byron out. And I wish I'd put those two facts together in a more transparent way. I don't believe Sue. I think the counselor is more trustworthy, as she wrote the facts before Columbine, and there's little reason for the counselor to lie or make up the facts. Personally, I think this is evidence that Sue is not trustworthy in her accounts of the past.
And when Timmy posted his clarification comment under his videos, it's very interesting that he said that the fact of whether she kicked Byron out of the house was disputed. But that's not what we're disputing. We're disputing whether she admits to it, and she doesn't. Now, another thing that Timmy brings up in his video is when I pointed out that he took the words of Tom and Sue out of context to try and imply that their views are that school shooters are completely random. And weirdly, Timmy's refutation to my point is to point out that he doesn't believe that school shooters are random. But I never said he did.
And I said Tom is insinuating that school shooters are seemingly random. Personally, I don't believe that it's random. That's the whole point of my video.
What I said was that he was claiming those were Tom and Sue's views when they're not. He took their words out of context to project these views onto them when they're not their views, and it was dishonest of him. I never said that those were his views. Now, the next thing I want to talk about in Timmy's video is super strange because of the way that he presents it. He says that I take issue with him reading the commentary on articles.
Morby doesn't like the fact that I covered what people in the media were saying about Sue's book and articles she was in.
But that's not what I say, is it? You see, the criticism in my original video was that Timmy said, I'm gonna go gauge the reactions to the TED Talk. And then he goes and reads a comment that was posted on an article reviewing Sue's book, which has nothing to do with the TED Talk. And the comment just happens to feed the narrative that Sue doesn't take accountability, despite the fact that the article itself proves that she does. The comment says that Sue blames Eric and the school but never takes accountability herself, and then Timmy takes no effort to read anything from that article that he just mentioned. So why did he bring up that article, and why is he bringing up the comments on that article, if not to just feed the narrative by reading out that comment and not contesting the comment? But Timmy misrepresents this whole thing as me having issues with him reading the commentary on articles so that he can pull this funny number.
When I found it a bit ironic that at the end of Morby's video, he went through the comments of my video. He even started arguing with what people said as if the words were mine or had anything to do with my video.
Well, this is what people have taken away from your video. Some people have even taken away the idea that she was doing it for money. This woman is literally cashing in on her son's status as a mass murderer. That's all I need to know. The fact that not only did she refuse to take any responsibility for what happened, but also made a profit off of it is conclusive proof that she was a dreadful mother who helped to raise a psychopath. She belongs under the prison.
Not once in the video did I ever accuse Sue of profiting off the tragedy.
Now, remember when we spoke about Timmy cutting off the footage of people so that he can misrepresent what it is that they're saying? Well, he's just done it to me as well. So I read out the top comments on Timmy's video at the time, and 2 of those comments said that Sue made money from it. And then I explicitly say that I don't know where they got this idea from. So I don't know where people got this idea that she's made profit off of it. In my video, I literally say that I don't know where people got this idea that she made money from. if I was going to suggest that Timmy said it, I would have said that. I've made it blatantly obvious. I have no issue with calling out Timmy on his bullshit. I would have said that if that's what I believed. But I literally said that I don't know where people got this idea from. The point that I'm making in the video is it would have been useful if you had pointed out the fact that she didn't make money from her book. You know, given how many times you reference her book, it would have been good if you pointed it out. So anyway, let's move on. If you remember, in Timmy's original video, he says that Judy Brown had warned Sue about Eric, and then he goes on to address all the things that Judy Brown knew about Eric, which is like the website, and the pipe bombs, and the death threats, and all of those things. But what he fails to point out, bizarrely, is the fact that Judy Brown had never told Sue about the website. Now, the reason I bring this up is because if Timmy is going to suggest that there's a mountain of evidence that Sue is ignoring, but then we start accounting for the things that Sue didn't know about, say the website, so she didn't know about the pipe bombs and the threats and everything, and the tapes, which she didn't have access to because they were in Eric's house, and she hadn't read the journal, and no one had warned Sue about the fact that Eric was violent. She didn't know about any incidents of Eric ever being violent. If we start accounting for those things, that mountain of evidence that he's suggesting becomes a pebble of evidence. Now, we could have a rational discussion over this, but the discussion would have to be that Sue could have done more to keep Dylan away from the non-violent criminal Eric, because to Sue, everything that she knew Eric had gotten up to that was wrong and a crime was the same thing that Dylan had gotten up to, which was breaking into vans and stealing school locker codes. So in his original video, Timmy shows a quote from Randy Brown, and in the quote it says that Sue was downplaying the warnings that Judy had given her. And so I provide the context in Judy Brown's own words that she hadn't warned her about the website. Well, in his response, Timmy says that I'm quoting the wrong person because he was talking about Randy Brown.
She makes light of the warnings that Judy gave her about Eric Harris. Judy told her that he was dangerous and to keep him away from Dylan. Judy warned her very clearly as a friend. Sue ignored her. Sue was warned and chose to ignore it. Morby then brings up a video from 1999 with Judy, not Randy, by the way. First off, it's the wrong person. I quoted Randy.
The quote says that Sue was downplaying the warnings that Judy gave her. And so quoting Judy would be correct, because if I was quoting Randy about what Judy said, that would be hearsay. Surely if we're going to talk about Judy's warnings to Sue, the people we're going to talk about are Judy and Sue, not Randy.
I know what she knows, and I will tell you, I did not share the web pages with her in the beginning, and I've explained that that's quite complicated. Until after the tragedy did I share the web pages with her. When I shared the web pages with her, she said, "Oh my, Eric is such an angry child." She had never known that.
And man, does this look like I'm being deceptive. And this is why a lot of you are so angry. Except I never made the argument that Sue knew about the website.
I never claimed that Timmy said that Judy had warned Sue about the website. In fact, I said the opposite. I said that Timmy purposely didn't mention the fact that Judy hadn't warned Sue about the website. I said that he was lying by omission to try and make you think that Judy's warnings were greater than they were. I think it's very telling that in his video where Timmy's repeatedly trying to make me out as strawmanning him, that he just repeatedly strawmans me. I don't strawman Timmy at any point in my video. I never claimed that he said that Judy had warned Sue about the website. Now, the next thing I want to address, I think was a genuine mistake from Timmy. I think that he misunderstood what it was that I was saying. I pointed out in my video that up till the point of the diversion hearing, Dylan had 2 things on his criminal record. Now, in response to this, Timmy brings up the locker break-ins and a threatening note that was left in one of the lockers.
2.5 minutes, Morby says Dylan only had 2 traffic tickets up until the diversion paperwork felony situation.
Her son, who up to this point only has 2 things on his criminal record, and they're both traffic violations.
This just isn't true. Dylan was suspended from school with Eric and some other friends for hacking into the computer system, stealing locker combinations, and trolling students in the school, leaving threatening letters and all sorts of stuff.
But the thing is, this isn't on Dylan's criminal record. When I say criminal record, I mean what the police were involved in. Now, they were kicked out of school for it, but that doesn't go on their criminal record. On his criminal record, he had 2 things, and they were driving violations. One was speeding, and the other one was stopping at a red light, and then when he saw that there were no cars around, he drove through the red light. Those were the things on his criminal record before the diversion hearing. Again, I think that that was probably just an error that he made hastily scripting. I don't think that he was trying to misrepresent anything there. That one is an easy misunderstanding. But the next one is not an easy misunderstanding. So do you remember the part in my video where I address Sue changing her wording wording to not implicate Dylan. And then I point out the fact that actually it would have implicated Eric because Eric already had access to the computers. Well, when Timmy comes to address this, he blatantly misrepresents what it is that I'm saying.
At around close to the 34-minute mark, Morby is getting frustrated with how I pointed out that Sue changed, gained access to have access, implying, saying that, she didn't want to imply something illicit. Eric didn't have access to the locker combinations.
In my video, I addressed the fact that Sue changed the wording from gained access to who had access to the computers, not to the locker codes. Eric was a student assistant in the tech lab. Eric already had access to the computers. I never said that Eric already had access to the locker codes. I said that Eric already had access to the computers. And now it's worth mentioning that actually both Eric and Dylan and their friend Zach Heckler had access to the computers, because Eric was a student assistant in the tech lab, and both Zach and Dylan were both helping to maintain the computer servers. So all three of them technically had access to the computers, but they didn't have access to the locker codes. Those were hacked. And if Sue had written in that sentence that they gained access, that would have seemed illicit. She was right to point out the fact that they already had access to the computers. Timmy is just strawmanning me left, right, and center, and then claiming that I'm strawmanning him. And then finally, at the end of his video, Timmy takes issue with me pointing out that I don't accept it when he says that he has a hard time believing Sue over X, Y, and Z. Now, I was very clear why. I pointed out the fact that he doesn't give a reason for not believing her. He just says that he doesn't believe her. But then he says that I do the same thing when I don't accept that he made an error. But the difference here is that I have very good reasons for not believing Timmy, and I've been very vocal about them. For example, when he talks about misquoting people, those quotes were very clearly not by Sue. And so that's the reason that I don't just outright accept it when he goes, oopsie, I made a oopsie poopsie mistake. Now, there are a couple more things that I want to address in this video, but my footage corrupted because I was using a cheap SD card, and frankly, I don't feel like re-recording this, so I'll do it like this. When Timmy talks about the Tom and Sue interview, when he implied that they believe that school shooters are random, he once again implies that they do believe that school shooters are random. And to illustrate this, he shows a quote from Sue's book, where she dreams of a baby Dylan having scars that she hadn't noticed. But this is how he chooses to present it.
The Klebold do not believe that they created a monster. They believe Dylan was born with mental illness that caused him to do the things that he did.
First of all, nobody claims that the Klebolds created a monster. Timmy's not saying that, I'm not saying that, and the Klebolds aren't saying that. As we've already determined, many things caused Dylan to become a homicidal killer. Mental health issues was one of them, but then also there was bullying, there was his friendship with Eric, and all of the other things. And second of all, I don't know why Timmy decides to claim that the hidden pain that Sue is speaking about in this story was the same thing that caused him to do what he did, which I assume means Columbine. All of this argument seems to boil down to the interpretation of what the hidden pain is in this story. To me, it means depression, and being depressed isn't the same as being homicidal. The fact that Timmy has had to rely on such a nebulous anecdote to try and make this case kind of shows how tenuous it is. The second thing that I mentioned in my corrupted footage was that I don't show the clip of Judy Brown to refute the claim that Sue was downplaying the warning signs. I show the clip to illustrate both that Judy doesn't blame Sue, as Judy clearly says that she knew what Sue knew, and she didn't see this side of Dylan, and also to establish what the warning signs might have looked like, i.e., not the website. The other thing I would have liked would have been for Timmy to have explained himself as to why he misrepresented the Mother's Day argument as being about Mother's Day in order to make a quasi-diagnosis of Sue being a narcissist. Now, all of this is not to say that there was nothing that I didn't like about the video. There was a couple of things that I liked. Number one, the tone was good. The fact that it was brought down from us yelling at each other, I liked and I appreciated. It felt like the energy of the video was level-headed, even though the things that he was saying were not. That's the reason that I'm willing to let this go now, is because I feel like we both made fools out of ourselves yelling at each other, and now we can leave this on a mature note. The other thing that I liked was that when Timmy addressed the error that he made in claiming that Columbine was the only school shooting involving two shooters, His response to that seemed reasonable, and if he had responded to everything in that way, we'd all probably have moved on a lot quicker. Because Timmy's response to that was saying that he had gone in some database and he had eliminated all of the shootings that had one killing in it, and he was wrong to do that, and he'd made a mistake, and his wording was bad, and yada yada, right? But importantly, he didn't follow that up by going, but anyway, I'm right on the point. He actually just said, this was what I did, this was how I made the error. Now, we can argue whether that's the way that the error actually happened, but the fact is, that might have been how he made that error, and so we can leave it there. He made the error, he says that he made the error, and then he moves on. And that would have been the correct way to do things. And the thing is, I'm not above making errors. I made plenty of errors. There was a point in my video where I said that Sue was a victim, but not as much of a victim as the victims of the families. Obviously, they're not as much victims as the victims of the families. It doesn't make sense, does it? But then there's also other errors I made. For example, at one point I said that Sue didn't have access to the journals, when what I meant was Sue didn't have access to the information inside Dylan's journal. Now, I don't know if she had access to the journal or not. No one does. No one knows where it was found in the room, I guess, other than the officers who seized it. The fact is that in the transcripts of the basement tapes, both Dylan and Eric speak about hiding things around their room. You know, like Eric keeps things in the hutch in his desk, and hidden behind speakers, and hidden in his closet, and what have you. But what I do know is she didn't have access to the information inside of the journal, and that's what I meant to say. And also, I seemed flippant when I was speaking about therapeutic art teachers. I didn't mean to be. A lot of people, if you were a therapeutic art teacher, you might have said that I was like downplaying your role and your qualifications, and I wasn't. I was merely pointing out the fact that therapeutic art teachers can't make DSM diagnoses, for example, so you can't expect them to be able to deduce when someone is going to become a school shooter. Still, I probably should have been more delicate in my wording, and that was my issue. Genuine mistakes happen all the time. I'm willing to accept that Timmy made a mistake when he suggested that Columbine was the only school shooting involving 2 people. Ultimately, people make mistakes all the time. This video has taken me over 2 hours to film because I keep saying the wrong things. We all make mistakes. I'm sure I've made more mistakes in my video. You probably made more mistakes than I was able to point out. And so as far as I'm concerned, this is my final statement on the whole thing. I'm not interested in coming back here and making more videos about Timmy 2 cents. I think it's best that we all move on, because the fact is, Timmy made an incredibly deceptive YouTube video, and when I held him accountable for it, he made another deceptive video to cover for the first deceptive video. I've got no interest in dealing with someone who acts in such bad faith like that, and so I'm happy to just move on. This is my final response. This is why I haven't addressed it to Timmy, because we don't want to sit there just back and forth, back and forth. It would be stupid. I'm wasting your time, and I'm wasting my time. We've all got better things to do. In the meantime, if you want to find me, you can find me right here at twitch.tv/myorby, where you'll see content just like this.
A heavy twist. She twisted his cock.
Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time. Like the video, subscribe. I'll release another video soon that has nothing to do with Timmy 2 cents. Oh, and remember, you must never turn your back on the bees.